Hi everyone, it's James here. How are you all doing? Welcome to another video. So this is a very long delayed vinyl finds video. I haven't made one for, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks to a month. So various reasons for that, which I won't bore you with now, but I'm here now anyway. So I'm going to take you through some charity shop finds from the last few weeks. So we'll have some fun with that hopefully. First of all though, some VCLT lovely gifts from my friend Rob Ison. And Rob was very kind to give me in person a copy of this record. This is Rough Mix by Pete Townshend and Ronnie Lane. So Rob and I actually met up a few days ago in a place called Grange-over-Sands, which is quite near where I live, and he was on holiday with his family, so we met up in the rain outside a cafe on a quiet street, and Rob handed me this record personally, and then we went to the pub and had a pint, and it was the first time we'd met. It was a lovely chat, and Rob's a great guy. If you haven't subscribed to him already, head over there now and check him out. He's got great taste in music, big fan of incredible string band, Roy Harper, and Beatles, Floyd, all the good stuff. So I don't remember now why or how he'd come to have this album that he didn't want a copy of, but I'd mentioned to him that I didn't have it, and it was a record I'd never heard before. So this record came out, I think it was in the early 80s. I think it was after the final tour that The Who had done with Keith Moon, and Ronnie Lane of the Small Faces had asked Townshend to produce a record for him, and somehow it turned into a collaboration album. And it's a really nice record actually. It's quite mellow. It's not really what I was expecting. I always assumed that it would be quite a hard rocking set, but it's not really. They kind of take it in turns a little bit. It starts out with My Baby Gives It Away, which I think is a Pete Townshend track. It's got Charlie Watts on drums, just completely unmistakable drum sound immediately. Then the next track, Nowhere to Run, is Ronnie Lane. Then a Pete Townshend instrumental called Rough Mix, and so on and so forth. It goes on like that, alternating. So when I first started listening to it, I thought, I'm not sure about this. It doesn't seem like it is a cohesive album. It just sounds like they're taking it in turns. And the two guys do have a slightly different sound. Ronnie Lane on this record, he's definitely aiming for the soft folky kind of sound. He's not in full heavy Pete Townshend mode, but his stuff is maybe a little bit more upbeat. But then as the record goes on, they seem to mesh a little bit. There's a couple of tracks where I think they do co-writes with each other, but also just the general kind of sound and feel that they're going for starts to meld a little bit, and it's a really nice record. There's a really interesting Pete Townshend track on the start of side 2 called Misunderstood, which has a very insightful lyric from Pete Townshend. Got to say, I'm more of a Pete Townshend solo fan than I am a Who fan. That might be sacrilege in some quarters, but anyway, really nice record, great to get it, great to meet Rob, so thank you very much Rob, and that is a much appreciated gift. So that is Rough Mix by Pete Townshend and Ronnie Lane. So I'm going to show you, I think I've got 6 records here to show you, and they're all from Oxfam in Lancaster. Now I've found quite a lot of stuff in Oxfam over the last few months, but I'm going to confine myself here to showing records which are, I suppose you'd classify them as being, broadly speaking, new wave. Now I know that term is a little bit disputed in some quarters, so don't get het up if you don't agree with my definition of that, but they're all, to me, they all fall into that category, kind of late 70s, heading into the 80s, post-punk, new wave kind of thing. Anyway, we'll see. So this first one, I was walking past Oxfam and I saw it in the window, and I stopped and went in because I've got nothing by this guy in the collection at all. This is Life's a Riot with Spy vs Spy by Billy Bragg, the working class confrontational Northern English singer-songwriter. Now this is an EP actually. This came out in I don't know what year. It's on Go Discs, and this contains his original version of A New England, which of course was later covered by Kirsty MacColl. Love her version of that. I think I probably prefer it to Billy's version, but even so, thought it would be nice to get a copy of this. Now, I didn't realise it was an EP when I bought it, and it's quite funny because I paid something like, I think I paid £5 for it or something like that. And on the cover, actually, here it says, when it first came out, it says pay no more than £2.99. So I actually paid more than £2.99 for it. And the other thing about this record is that I can't actually listen to it at the moment because my turntable has a fault and won't play 45s. Well, it will play them, but only after a good kicking. So I've streamed this, but I haven't actually got to play it yet. It's in lovely condition. We've got the light coming in here this morning, so you're not going to be able to see the labels on these. It's probably not worth me showing you. Oh, there we go, you can sort of see that there, utility. So yes, haven't managed to spin this one yet, and like I said, it was an EP rather than an LP, but even so, I was pleased to pick it up. So that's Billy Bragg, and my first record by him. Right, this next one was in the racks inside the shop. It was a different day, I think. Now, this is an artist, I picked up a record by him a couple of years ago, which I absolutely loved. In fact, possibly it was my favourite second-hand record pickup of whichever year it was. I think it was 2 years ago. And that was his, I think maybe his third album, something like that. This is his debut album, and I was hoping when I bought it that it was going to be a similar kind of sound and vibe, and it is, happily, so I was really glad to grab it. So this is the great Captain Sensible, and this is his debut album. It's called Women and Captains First. Some great cover art there. We can see Margaret Thatcher and the Queen on the boat there, and various people jumping off and trying to save themselves. Really good cover art, actually. And there's Captain Sensible from the Damned, and I don't think he'd even left the Damned at this point when he made this record. This is probably 1982. And so the previous album that I bought by him was called The Power of Love, and it's got a great sound. It's not what you'd expect from Captain Sensible and the Damned. It has a very keyboard, synthy kind of sound to it. Some people might call it dated, but strangely enough, with the way music has gone in the last maybe 5 years, that kind of 80s sound has kind of come back, really. Or maybe I'm a bit outdated there, maybe it was 10 years ago, I'm not sure, but you know, that kind of synthy kind of sound has definitely made a comeback. So I just find it a very appealing sound, and a bit like the Power of Love album, he has some help on this from the great Robin Hitchcock, the quirky English singer-songwriter, very Syd Barrett inspired. Robin appears here on 12-string guitar, and he's got a couple of songs on the album, produced by Tony Mansfield, who I've got a feeling was the producer that the Damned had been using. And this record was quite successful, had quite a few singles from this. There's a Rodgers and Hammerstein song on here called Happy Talk, and yeah, so the sound is very similar to Power of Love. Keyboardy, synthy, you've got that Syd Barrett, quirky English kind of lyrical angle. There's a song on here about having a cup of tea. What's it called? It's quite sort of kinksy. A nice cup of tea. And it has that Ray Davies, Syd Barrett thing in spades. So, nice record. I don't think it's quite as strong as The Power of Love, but there's some great stuff on it, so that was nice. A cheap find. All these were cheap records, only a few quid each. So that's Captain Sensible and Women and Captains First. And this next one, again, an artist who I bought her most famous album a few years ago now, and this is one that I've been looking for ever since and haven't been able to find it, and it just popped up in the rack. So the one that I'd got already was Breaking Glass, which was her first album. That was a soundtrack, actually, to the film that she'd been in, and it was produced by Tony Visconti. And her second album, I don't remember the name of it, but that had been a bit of a flop album. So she went back with Tony Visconti again. This is Hazel O'Connor, and she made this record Cover Plus. And you can see here the artwork. It's the same guy that did the artwork for David Bowie's Hunky Dory, very similar style. And this is a great record. This is really, really top stuff. Hazel O'Connor, she doesn't really get the credit of maybe your Kate Bush. She doesn't have that kind of level of fame or respect, but I think she was a really interesting original songwriter. There's some great stuff on this record. There's a song called EEI Adio, which I think was based on her debut single, and that song is basically about domestic abuse. And there's another song on here which is all about playing doctors and nurses, so a song about young children discovering each other's bodies. That's in fact that's the title track, Cover Plus, We're All Grown Up. There's a couple of cover versions on here. You've got a cover version of, there's a track from Lou Reed's Berlin, which is Men of Good Fortune, and there's also a cover of The Stranglers Hanging Around, which is quite close to the original really. You've got the Tony Visconti production, it has that early 80s sound to it. Hazel O'Connor was a really interesting vocalist. She's quite edgy, she has her own take on things really, and it was just a great thing to find, going cheap in Oxfam. Been after a copy for ages. I'm not going to get it out, but it does contain a huge poster of that cover, so that's quite a nice thing to have as well. So there we go, Hazel O'Connor and Cover Plus. Right, 2 records by the same band. Now this is a band I was never into back in the mist of time. The reason for that was their big famous hit song was vastly overplayed on the radio and on jukeboxes back in the day, and I always found it a bit of an annoying song anyway. But then a couple of years back, or maybe it was last year, I picked up one of those 5 CD box sets. I thought I might as well try and give them a go with their early stuff. And I was quite surprised by what I heard. The earlier albums were more to my taste, and so anyway, I found two records in the racks, both going cheap together at Oxfam. This is the Cars, and this is their album Panorama, which I think is their 3rd album. Really beautiful condition on both these records, and there's the band there on the back. And so there was that one, and then this is their 4th album, Shake It Up, and that was nestling next to that one in the racks at Oxfam. And so this pair of records, been really enjoying them, and I don't know whether they're going to make me a big Cars fan, but they're definitely a more interesting group than I think I'd given them credit for in the past. I was streaming the 2nd album by Suicide the other day, who are a very experimental New York synth duo, and I was amazed that that record was produced by the guy from the Cars, Rick Ocasek. And I can kind of hear that. There's a kind of slightly edgier sound on these records than maybe I would have expected. Very cold, synthy kind of sound. Of course, they were both produced by Roy Thomas Baker of Queen fame, so these were literally maybe £2.50 each, and in a way it made me really sorry that all 4 of the albums I would want were not there together in the racks, but can't complain anyway. So yeah, the first 4 albums are the 4 that I really like. I'm not so keen on the one that has Drive on it. I think that was produced by Mutt Lange. I find that one a bit soporific really, but anyway, it was nice to find those 2, and they are now in the collection. Right, 2 more to go. This one I found yesterday. It's the most recent find, and this again was in the window. This was more than I wanted to pay really, but it's a record that I've been looking for so many years. I can remember it, seeing it in the collection of my Scottish cousin Paul back in the 1970s when I was a child, and I love the cover, I love the single from it, and incredibly, I don't think I've ever seen a copy of it in the wild, but it's this. It is The Vapors and Nuclear Days, and this is their first album. Came out in maybe 1980. So they were a British, I guess, sort of punk, new wave type band. They were discovered by Bruce Foxton from the Jam, and I think they supported the Jam on the Setting Suns tour. And they made a couple of albums, only had a brief career really, and this was the first of the 2. Don't have the second one. But of course the big famous song that everybody will know from this is Turning Japanese, which was a big hit single here in the UK. Not sure if it did anything stateside, but it was a big single here. And yeah, this is a really nice album. I mean, I don't think it's a fantastically brilliant album, but I do think it has some quite interesting stuff on it. It definitely captures that late 70s, early 80s vibe. It's a little bit Jam light maybe. You can definitely hear that the singer and maybe the guitarist too are trying to edge into Jam, a kind of Jam type sound, but they don't quite have the angry confrontational sound that Paul Weller had with that band. But it's still a good album. It's good fun. It's of that era, and it's the kind of thing that I collect. And it's my kind of thing really. So classic British pop music from those great old days of classic British pop music, because I was lucky enough to be born in that period, late 1970s. If I couldn't be lucky enough to be born in the 60s, then late 1970s was the time to be around, really. So great to finally get that into the collection anyway. That's the Vapors and Nuclear Days, get the pun there. And this last one is a record I was so pleased to find. I've been looking for a copy of it for so many years, and again it was in Oxfam. Can't remember if it was in the window or whether I went into the shop and discovered it. But anyway, it's in really nice condition. One of the last records I need by this band. There are a few more still to get from the later period. This was the last one I needed from the earlier period of the band's career, and it's their debut album. So really pleased to find a copy of the debut XTC album, and it's called White Music, of course. I picked this up a couple of days after I'd done a video with Ross Goodall, which was, I think it was on my channel. No, it was on his channel. It was we did a video on favourite Andy Partridge songs, and in that video I wasn't able to show the vinyl of this record, but a couple of days later, walking through town, hey presto, there it is. So one of those slightly unfortunate timings, but still pleased to get it. So yeah. So I'm not a huge fan of the very early XTC compared to the later stuff. I think for me they really turned into a very interesting band when Dave Gregory came on board. But there's still some good stuff on this record. You've got Radios in Motion, of course, by Andy Partridge, which opens the album. This is pop, and it has that classic, almost textbook kind of post-punk sound, those tangled guitars, barbed wire kind of guitar sound, jittery rhythms, and slightly annoying vocals at times, but it's definitely a post-punk classic from one of the great British bands of the period, so great to get that into the collection. So that is XTC and White Music. So that concludes this particular selection. I do have some other records to show, also from Oxfam. I've got quite a wide variety of stuff, really. There's jazz, blues, world music, but I thought I would keep those together because they all seem to have a kind of similar thread to them. So that's why I did that. So hope you enjoyed that update, and I'll try to be back soon and show you the other stuff that I picked up. So in the meantime, have a great day, and I will see you all soon. Take care. Bye bye.